He really thinks we're throwing him a surprise party tomorrow. My wife Victoria's laughter floated through the ventilation grill of the home office directly below our bedroom. I turned over in bed, surprised by her tone. It wasn't the warm laughter I had known for 34 years. It was cold, calculated. "Mom, are you sure the lawyer said the eviction notice is legal?" My son Thomas's voice now. "We've got it covered," my wife replied. "The business transfer, the house deed, the divorce papers. By tomorrow night, your father will own nothing but that old pickup truck he refuses to sell." I stood frozen on the bedroom floor, my knees pressing into the carpet as my family casually discussed my elimination. My name is Peter Caldwell. I am 62 years old, and I have just discovered that the surprise birthday party my family was planning was, in fact, a meticulously orchestrated ambush to leave me with nothing. My hand found the edge of the bed, squeezing until my knuckles turned white. Through the grill, I heard chairs scraping across the office floor. Papers being shuffled. Thomas's voice returned, clinical and distant, the way he probably sounded in court. "The transfer documents are bulletproof. I've structured everything so he can't claim coercion. As long as he signs voluntarily, thinking it's something else, we're protected." "And is Diane ready to move this weekend?" asked my daughter Rachel. There was an anxiety in her voice that made my stomach churn. Diane Patterson. The name had been floating around our social circle for months. A recent widow who had inherited her husband's building materials distribution business. "Diane understands the timeline," Victoria said. Her voice carried a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in over a year. "She's already moved some of her things to the storage unit downtown. As soon as Peter leaves, we can start fresh." I crept away from the railing, my movement silent on the thick carpet I had chosen specifically for its sound-dampening qualities. Ironic that my choice of decor now allowed me to spy on my own ruin. I stood up with shaky legs and walked to the bedroom window, looking out at the backyard where we had raised our children. The swing set had been gone for years, replaced by my workshop, but I could still see its ghost in the worn patch of grass that never fully recovered. The conversation below continued, but I had heard enough. My family had been planning this for months, while I kept their lives running smoothly. That morning alone, I had reviewed 5 contracts for the construction company, confirmed next week's material deliveries, and balanced the accounts that Thomas was supposed to be managing. I walked to our closet and pulled the small suitcase from the top shelf, the one I used for overnight business trips. My hands moved automatically, folding clothes, selecting items that predated my marriage. The pocket watch my father gave me when I completed my first big project. The leather wallet I bought with my first paycheck. The college photo album, before Victoria existed in my world. Downstairs, I heard the office door open. Footsteps scattered throughout the house. Victoria's heavy footsteps toward the kitchen. Thomas's lighter footsteps toward the front door, probably leaving for his downtown apartment, the one I had co-signed when his credit wasn't sufficient. Rachel's heels clicking toward the garage where her Mercedes was parked, the car we gave her for completing her master's degree. I put the bag back in the closet and went downstairs with rehearsed normality. Victoria was at the kitchen counter pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the thin crack that Thomas had given her years ago. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment I saw a flash of something. Guilt, anticipation. It passed too quickly to identify. "Plans for the morning?" I asked, taking my own mug from the cupboard. "Just some paperwork at the office." She didn't meet my eyes. "Tomorrow is an important day. Your birthday. 62 years old." The words hung between us like a loaded gun on the table. "I suppose that's worth celebrating. We have something special planned." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It hadn't for months, I realized. When did I stop noticing? The morning stretched out ahead with its usual routine, but everything felt different now. I drove to our construction company's warehouse where Carlos greeted me with his usual expression of concern about inventory discrepancies. 3 pallets of premium oak flooring had disappeared from our system. 2 shipments of marble had been redirected without authorization. The security cameras had mysteriously failed on the exact nights these changes occurred. "Mr. Caldwell," Carlos said, lowering his voice. "Something isn't right here. These aren't accidents or software glitches." I patted him on the shoulder, this loyal man who had worked with us since the beginning. "I know, Carlos. Don't worry about it. Just document everything carefully. He nodded, confusion clear on his face. He didn't understand why I wasn't more upset. How could I explain that stolen flooring was the least of my concerns when my entire life was being systematically dismantled by the people I trusted most? If you're enjoying this tale of family betrayal, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how this carefully planned ambush would turn out to be the biggest mistake they ever made. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. I attended meetings, signed purchase orders, and solved problems as if everything were normal. But underneath, my mind was racing, planning, preparing. Every interaction with Thomas felt like theater. He stopped by the office to discuss software issues with inventory, his face a mask of professional concern while he knew he had orchestrated the entire situation. Rachel called to confirm Sunday's family dinner, her voice bright and fake. "We'll celebrate your birthday properly then, Dad. Just family, the way you prefer it." I agreed, matching her tone. Both of us playing our parts in this elaborate deception. That evening, I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner while Victoria worked in her office below. Through the railing, I could hear her on the phone, probably with Diane, her voice low and intimate. Tomorrow, they planned to serve me with papers at what I was supposed to believe was my birthday celebration. Tomorrow, they would watch me sign away everything I had spent 34 years building. But tonight, I stood in my kitchen cooking Victoria's favorite meal for the last time, my movements calm and precise. They thought I was oblivious, content in my routine, blind to their machinations. Let them think that. Tomorrow would come soon, and with it, surprises they never anticipated. My phone was on the counter with 3 numbers already programmed, waiting for the next day. Margaret Chun, forensic accountant. James Bradley, corporate lawyer. Detective Samuel Kane, who still had questions about the death of my business partner 8 years ago. I smiled as I plated up dinner, a genuine smile for the first time all day. They thought tomorrow was their carefully orchestrated end. But what they didn't know was that I had been keeping a secret for a long time. A secret that would turn their ambush into the biggest mistake of their lives. That Friday morning, 3 days before my birthday, Victoria appeared in the kitchen wearing a new dress. A black Chanel I had never seen before, with the tag still discreetly hanging from the side. $6,200. I knew because I had seen that same model when I accompanied Rachel on one of her shopping trips downtown. "Do you like it?" she asked, twirling slightly. "Diane helped me pick it out yesterday. She said I needed something more sophisticated for her meetings." Diane again. The woman who was waiting in the wings to take my place in my own home. "It's beautiful," I replied, returning to my coffee. "Did you take it out of the joint account?" "From my personal account," she quickly corrected. "Too personal." Victoria had never had a personal account in 34 years of marriage. Everything had always been ours, shared, transparent. Or at least I thought it was. My phone vibrated with a message from Rachel. "Dad, can you stop by the gallery today? I need your signature on some vendor paperwork." Vendor paperwork. Code for yet another trap being set. I drove to Rachel's gallery in the Arts District, that elegant space we had opened 18 months ago with expensive champagne and hopes that my daughter would finally find her way. The initial investment had been mine, $300,000 that Victoria said was essential for our daughter's future. Rachel was on the phone when I walked in, gesturing animatedly as she talked about an upcoming exhibition. She pointed to a folder on the glass table and continued talking. I opened the folder. These were not vendor documents. It was a deed of transfer of ownership of the gallery, changing my name as the original owner to hers as the sole owner, retroactive to 6 months ago. The signature would be my confirmation that I had never owned anything. I closed the folder without signing. Rachel hung up the phone and looked at me with that expression she had used since she was a teenager when she wanted something. "Dad, it's just a formality. The accountant said everything needs to be organized for tax purposes." Tax purposes. Another code. "I'll have my lawyer review it first," I replied, tucking the folder under my arm. For the first time, I saw a flash of panic on her face. "You don't need to involve lawyers, Dad. It's family. You trust me, don't you?" The question echoed in the empty space of the gallery. Trust. The word they were using as a weapon against me. "Of course I trust you, Rachel. That's why I'm going to do everything right, with proper legal documentation." I left before she could argue. In the parking lot, I called James Bradley, the corporate lawyer who had helped me structure the company 20 years ago. James, I need an urgent and confidential favor. Within 2 hours, I was in his office on the 23rd floor of the Paramount building, pouring out everything I had discovered. He listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes in his yellow legal pad. "Peter, this is more serious than you realize," he finally said, pushing his glasses up his forehead. "If they get your signature on these documents during a supposed birthday celebration, they can claim you were emotionally vulnerable but technically capable. It's a legal gray area that Nathan, being a lawyer, is surely familiar with." "What do I do?" James leaned forward. "Sign the documents. All of them. But not before I prepare parallel documentation that invalidates everything on the grounds of coercion and fraud. We'll need solid evidence that they were planning this." "The recordings." I pulled out my phone and showed him the app one had installed 3 days ago, after overhearing the conversation through the ventilation grill. I had recorded every word since then. Victoria discussing financial details with Diane. Thomas reviewing legal clauses with Nathan. Rachel complaining about having to wait until after the birthday to sell some of my old tools. James spent the next hour listening to the recordings, his face growing progressively more serious. "Peter, they're not just planning a divorce. They're orchestrating a complete transfer of assets. Your company, your house, even your tools. And look at this," he pointed to a specific transcript. "Victoria mentions an insurance policy. Have you recently increased your life insurance?" I froze. 3 months ago. She said we needed more coverage now that we're older. I increased it to $2 million. James closed his eyes briefly. "And who is the beneficiary?" "Victoria, of course. And secondarily, the children." "Peter, I need you to listen to me very carefully." James stood up and closed the office door. "I have a friend in the police department, Detective Samuel Kane. He investigated Robert Patterson's death 8 years ago. Diane's husband. Robert Patterson. The name hit me like a punch. Diane was married to Robert Patterson? The Robert who owned the materials distribution company. The same. He died of a heart attack at 53, just 6 months after increasing his life insurance to $3 million. Diane inherited everything and sold the company in 9 months. My hand gripped the arm of the chair. "And you think?" "I'm not thinking anything yet. But Kane was never completely satisfied with that case. There were some inconsistencies that were never explained. And now your wife is romantically involved with Robert's widow, and you just increased your life insurance." I left James's office 3 hours later with a plan. It wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about survival. If James and Kane were right about Diane, I wasn't just facing a nasty divorce. I was potentially marked for death. That evening, Victoria prepared my favorite dinner. Rare steak, roasted potatoes, grilled asparagus. She placed the plate in front of me with a smile that didn't match her eyes. "Eat while it's hot," she said, sitting across from me with only a salad. "Aren't you hungry?" I asked. Diane and I had a late lunch. I'm on a diet. I looked at the perfectly cooked steak. At the golden potatoes. At the glass of red wine she had generously poured. Very generously. "You know, honey, I'm more tired than hungry." I pushed the plate away gently. "I think I'll just take a shower and go to bed early." I saw something flash across her face. Disappointment? Irritation? "But I made your favorite. And I appreciate that. I'll eat it tomorrow for lunch, I promise." I went upstairs, but I didn't go to the bathroom. I went straight to the closet and grabbed the suitcase I had packed days ago. My phone vibrated. It was James. "Kane wants to see you tomorrow morning. Early. He has information about Diane that you need to hear." I looked out the bedroom window. Victoria was in the garden, on the phone, gesturing wildly. Even from a distance, I could read her body language. She was frustrated. Angry. For the first time in 34 years of marriage, I was genuinely afraid of the woman I shared my bed with. Tomorrow would be Saturday. The day before my birthday. The day before the trap was set. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun to dismantle every part of their plan, piece by piece. And when Sunday came, when they handed me those papers with fake smiles and cruel expectations, I would sign each one of them. Because sometimes, The best way to win a game is to let your opponent think they've won, while you're already playing a completely different game. Saturday arrived with cloudy skies and heavy air. The meeting with Detective Samuel Kane was scheduled for 7 in the morning at Diner's Cup, a discreet coffee shop 40 minutes from home. I chose a table in the back, with my back to the wall, with a clear view of the entrance. Old habits from my time in the military never really go away. Kane arrived on time, a man in his 50s with gray hair and eyes that didn't miss a thing. He sat down without ceremony and pushed a brown briefcase across the table. "Robert Patterson didn't die of a natural heart attack," he said without preamble. At least not in the sense that the coroner's report concluded. I opened the briefcase. Photographs, medical reports, bank statements. Robert had 3 episodes of food poisoning in the 2 months prior to his death. Always after dinners at home, prepared by his wife. The symptoms were consistent with gradual poisoning by digitalis, a plant-derived toxin that in small doses causes nausea and weakness. In larger doses, heart attack. Why didn't you investigate further? Kane took a sip of black coffee. Lack of physical evidence. He was cremated 48 hours after his death, at Diane's insistence. And she had an alibi for the night of the attack. She was at a charity event with 200 witnesses. But you never believed that. Experience has taught me to trust my instincts. And my instincts told me that Diane Patterson was a very well-prepared widow. Everything was too organized. The insurance policies had been recently updated, the wills revised 6 months earlier, even the choice of funeral home had already been decided. He pulled out another photo. An elegant woman in her 40s, impeccable blonde hair, calculated smile. Diane Patterson. The same woman who was waiting to move into my house, into my life. There's more. Her first husband, Gerald Harrison, died in a similar fashion 5 years before Robert. Heart attack at 49. Also cremated quickly. Also had generous life insurance. I felt the coffee turn sour in my stomach. 2 dead husbands. Both from heart attacks. Both cremated before questions were asked. And now she's romantically involved with you, Kane leaned forward. Or rather, with your wife. And you just increased her life insurance. Peter, you're not just facing an unpleasant divorce. You may be in the crosshairs of a serial killer. I returned home 2 hours later with my head spinning. Victoria was in the kitchen preparing lunch, humming softly. The scene was so normal, so domestic, that for a moment I doubted everything. This was the woman who promised to love me in sickness and in health. The mother of my children. How could she be planning not only to rob me, but potentially to kill me? "Peter, where have you been?" she asked without turning away from the stove. "I had to leave early. Take care of some things." "The day before your birthday? You should be resting." The concern in her voice sounded genuine. Maybe it was. Maybe Victoria really didn't know about Diane's more sinister plans. Or maybe she was just an exceptional actress. My phone vibrated. A message from Thomas. "Dad, we need to talk. It's urgent." I called back. My son answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "Dad, where are you? I need to see you. Alone." "I'm at home." "No. Somewhere public. Riverside Park in 20 minutes. I found Thomas sitting on a bench near the lake, staring at the water. When I approached him, I noticed he was shivering, despite the heat. "Thomas, what's going on?" He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my son behind the mask of the confident lawyer. He was afraid. "Dad, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." I sat down next to him and waited. When Rachel came to me with the idea of divorce 6 months ago, it seemed simple. Mom was unhappy, you were always working, they said it would be better for everyone. And Diane, she was so convincing. She said she would take care of Mom, that you both deserved to be happy. And you believed her. I was greedy, Dad. Diane promised to put me in touch with her clients, to expand my career. And Rachel, she needed money for the gallery. Diane offered to invest, but only after the assets were reorganized. We thought, his voice faltered. We thought you'd be fine. That it was just business. But, last night, I heard Mom on the phone with Diane. They were arguing about something at your cafe. About timing and dosage. Dad, I think they're planning to hurt you. Not just financially. The world seemed to slow down. My own son, the son I taught to ride a bike, who I carried on my shoulders at football games, had conspired to destroy me. And now he was sitting here, finally realizing the gravity of what he had helped set in motion. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're my dad, his voice broke. And because I realized that Diane isn't interested in making Mom happy. She's interested in your money, the company, everything. And when she gets what she wants, she won't need any of us anymore. Thomas pulled an envelope from his pocket. I recorded yesterday's conversation. It's all in here. And I also copied the files from Diane's computer when I was at her apartment last week. There are things in there, Dad. Things about her previous husbands. I took the envelope with hands that weren't shaking. I didn't feel anger toward my son. I felt something worse, deep disappointment and strangely relief. Because now I had an ally on the inside, someone who could help me protect Victoria and Rachel before it was too late. Thomas, I need you to do something for me. Something very important. We spent the next hour in my truck, parked in a secluded corner of the park, while I explained exactly what I needed him to do. Every document he should copy, every conversation he should record, every move Diane and Victoria made that he should monitor. Tomorrow will happen exactly as they planned, I said. I'm going to sign the papers. I'll leave the house. But Thomas, when I leave, I want you to install hidden cameras in the house. Especially in the kitchen and the master bedroom. Do you think they'll try something as soon as you leave? I'm sure of it. And we'll need evidence that no jury can ignore. I returned home for the third time that day, exhausted but resolute. Victoria was in the living room, drinking tea with Rachel. My daughter stood up when she saw me, her face lighting up with that fake smile I had learned to recognize. Dad, I was waiting for you. I wanted to make sure you're excited for tomorrow. We've prepared something very special. I looked at my daughter, this young woman I had rocked as a baby, who had called me her hero as a child. She didn't know. I could see it now with clarity. Rachel was being manipulated just as much as I was, only in a different way. Diane had found each of our weaknesses and exploited them perfectly. I'm looking forward to it, I lied softly. 62 years. An important milestone. That night, lying next to Victoria for the last time, I heard her cell phone vibrate repeatedly on the nightstand. Messages from Diane, no doubt, coordinating the final details. Victoria finally picked up the phone and left the room, whispering in the hallway. When she returned, I pretended to be asleep. I felt her lie down, felt her breathing settle into a sleep pattern. And there, in the darkness of the room we had shared for 34 years, I made my final decision. Tomorrow they would have the show they wanted. Tomorrow I would sign all the papers, accept all the humiliations. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to gain the freedom to rebuild on your own terms. And when I rebuilt, it would be on foundations they could never touch again. Sunday dawned with a heavy silence. I woke up at 5 in the morning, long before Victoria, and did something I hadn't done in years. I made my own coffee. Every movement was deliberate, almost ritualistic. This would be my last morning in this house as its owner. James had sent me a message at 4:47. Everything is ready. The parallel documents are authenticated and sealed at the notary's office. When you sign theirs, ours automatically become valid based on proven coercion. Kane is in position with a surveillance team. I opened my laptop and reviewed for the last time the digital folder Thomas had sent me during the night. Files from Diane's computer that he had managed to copy when he visited her apartment the week before. What I found there chilled me to the bone. Diane kept meticulous records. Documents about Robert Patterson showed progressive bank transfers months before his death. Insurance policies with strategic increases. And most disturbing, a detailed spreadsheet tracking his physical symptoms over the last 8 weeks of his life. Fatigue, nausea, heart palpitations. All noted with clinical precision. There was also a file named VP, which I assumed stood for Victoria and Peter. The spreadsheet was identical to Robert's, but still empty. Blank spaces waiting to be filled with my own symptoms of deterioration. The final column had a title that made my blood run cold, estimated date of completion. I called Kane immediately. I found evidence of premeditation. Diane has a documented pattern. His response was swift. I'm 3 blocks from your house with 2 agents. We have a court order for emergency monitoring based on imminent threat to life. As soon as the celebration begins, we'll be recording everything. Carlos arrived at my office at 7 in the morning with more devastating information. Mr. Caldwell, I reviewed the records as you requested. Over the past 6 months, materials worth $420,000 have been misappropriated. The digital signatures are Thomas's and Rachel's. What's more, contracts you signed were altered afterward. Clauses changed, percentages adjusted. Did you save the originals? All saved in 3 different locations, sir. Cloud, external hard drive, and physical copies in the safe at my house. Carlos leaned forward. I also installed those cameras you asked for in the warehouse. If anyone tries to remove anything else, we'll have high-definition video. At 9 in the morning, James called me with the last piece of the puzzle. Peter, I've got something extraordinary. Diane's first husband, Gerald Harrison, had a sister. I found her in Oregon. She never believed the official version of his death and kept samples of his hair and nails before the cremation. Hair and nails preserve toxins for years. And I sent them for private forensic analysis. The results came in last night. High levels of digitalis, consistent with gradual poisoning over months. Peter, we have physical evidence of murder in a case everyone thought was closed. The final piece fell into place when Margaret Chun, the forensic accountant James had recommended, sent me her complete analysis. Mr. Caldwell, your wife opened 5 secret bank accounts in the last 8 months. All at different banks, all with balances between $15,000 and $30,000. The money came from subtle diversions from the company, small enough to go unnoticed individually. The total amounted to $142,000 that Victoria had systematically hidden while looking me in the eye every morning over breakfast. If you are following this journey of painful discoveries, consider subscribing to see how each piece of this dark puzzle would finally fit together into a devastating revelation. At noon, my phone rang. It was Rachel, her voice strangely tense. Dad, we need to talk before the party. It's about Thomas. I met my daughter at a discreet cafe across town. She was different, her eyes red, her hands shaking as she held her cup of tea. Thomas told me everything last night. About Diane, about the plans, about the previous husbands. Her voice broke. Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about any of this. What did you know, Rachel? She took a deep breath. I knew about the divorce. Mom said you hadn't been happy for years, that it was better for everyone. Diane offered to invest in the gallery after the assets were reorganized. I really thought that was all it was. Business. Family reorganization. Not murder. Tears began to stream down her face. But then Thomas showed me the files. The spreadsheets. The pattern. Dad, does Mom know? Does she know what Diane is really like? It was the question that haunted me. I don't know, sweetheart. But we'll find out today. At 3 in the afternoon, all the pieces were in place. Kane and his team in a nearby surveillance van. James with legal documents ready to be filed. Margaret with complete forensic analyses. Carlos storing physical evidence. Thomas prepared to testify against his own actions. And me, wearing my best suit, ready to walk into the trap my family had set. But this time, the trap had been carefully reconfigured. Every string they had stretched now connected back to themselves. When they pulled the trigger, they would discover that the target had changed. I took a deep breath, looked in the mirror, and saw not the victim they expected, but the architect of their own liberation. Sometimes saving people means forcing them to face the consequences of their own choices. Today would be that day for all of us. I arrived home at 5 in the afternoon, just as Victoria had requested. The parking lot was full of cars I recognized. Our neighbors, some co-workers, even my sister who lived in another state. They had really put together a full celebration to witness my destruction. The living room was decorated with gold balloons and a banner that read 62 years of life. The irony did not go unnoticed. Victoria greeted me at the door in a red dress I had never seen before, her best social smile perfectly in place. Happy birthday, dear. Come in, everyone is waiting. I walked through the door and felt the immediate change in atmosphere. It wasn't the energy of a real party. It was staged, artificial. The guests chatted in small groups, but their eyes followed me with morbid curiosity. They knew. They all knew what was about to happen. Rachel approached with a glass of champagne. "For you, Dad. A special toast." I took the glass but didn't drink. I just held it as I scanned the room. Thomas was near the fireplace, avoiding my gaze. Diane Patterson was next to Victoria, her hand casually touching my wife's shoulder possessively. "Peter, can we talk in the dining room?" Victoria gestured elegantly. "We have something to discuss before the cake." I followed her, Rachel, and Thomas to the dining room where a table was set not with food, but with documents. Stacks and stacks of documents with yellow markers indicating where I should sign. Victoria sat at the head of the table, assuming a position of authority I had never seen in her before. "Peter, we know this may seem abrupt, but we have reached a family consensus. Our relationship has come to an end, and it is time to reorganize our assets in a way that reflects each of our actual contributions." Thomas slid the first folder toward me, his voice taking on that lawyerly tone. "These are marital dissolution documents. The terms are fair considering that most of the estate was built through connections and resources that Mom brought into the marriage." I opened the folder slowly. Divorce with total waiver of marital assets. Transfer of the company to Victoria. Transfer of the house. Even my workshop in the backyard was being claimed as part of the property. I would get the truck and $5,000. 34 years, my voice came out calm, almost curious. 34 years reduced to a pickup truck and $5,000. Rachel leaned forward, her expression hardened in a way that made me not recognize my own daughter. "Dad, don't be dramatic. You were always just the operational arm. Mom had the connections, I brought the creative vision, Thomas the legal knowledge. You just executed orders." Her words were designed to cut, to make me feel insignificant. And they worked, but not in the way she expected. Each cruel word was another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. I picked up the pen Victoria had carefully placed next to the documents. An expensive Mont Blanc I had given her on our 20th wedding anniversary. I began to sign. Page after page, signature after signature. The room was eerily silent except for the sound of the pen on paper. I saw Victoria and Rachel exchange surprised glances. They expected a fight, they expected tears, they expected anything but this quiet acceptance. When I finished the last document, I placed the pen on the table with a soft click. Done. All signed. Victoria quickly gathered the documents, as if afraid I would change my mind. "Peter, this is very mature of you. We can keep this civil." "Absolutely," I agreed, standing up. "May I say a few words to our guests before I go?" They agreed, clearly relieved that everything had been so easy. We returned to the room where the guests were waiting, now completely silent. All eyes were fixed on me, waiting for the collapse, the final humiliation. I cleared my throat. "I want to thank everyone for coming today. It's comforting to know who really cares about you in the most important moments." I paused, looking around the room. And who was just here for the entertainment? That's when the doorbell rang. Victoria frowned. "We're not expecting anyone else." Thomas went to the door and opened it. 4 federal agents entered, their badges already raised. "Victoria Caldwell? Rachel Caldwell? We need you to come with us to answer some questions about corporate fraud and conspiracy." The room fell completely silent. Victoria turned pale. "This is a mistake. Peter, what have you done?" Detective Kane entered behind the agents, his face serious. "Diane Patterson, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder. You have the right to remain silent." Diane tried to run, but 2 agents blocked her. Her face, normally so composed, was contorted with panic. "This is ridiculous. You have nothing." "We have hair samples from Gerald Harrison showing digitalis poisoning," Kane replied calmly. "We have your spreadsheets detailing Robert Patterson's symptoms. And we have recordings of you discussing doing the same to Peter Caldwell." Victoria grabbed the table for support. "Peter, I didn't know. About the poisoning, I swear I didn't know. I looked at the woman I had been married to for over 3 decades. But you knew about the theft. About the secret accounts. About using our anniversary as a trap for public humiliation. Rachel began to cry. "Dad, please." James Bradley walked in through the front door, his leather briefcase under his arm. "Mr. Caldwell, the parallel documents are all on record. Every signature you made today is legally void based on proven coercion and documented fraud." Thomas approached me, his voice low. "Dad, I'll testify. About everything." Victoria was led away in handcuffs. Rachel too. Diane fought until the last moment, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits. The party guests stood frozen, witnessing the complete implosion of a family that had seemed perfect. When the house finally emptied, I was left alone in the room that had been prepared for my humiliation. The gold balloons still floated. The birthday banner still hung. But the trap had closed on the one who built it. My phone rang. It was Carlos. "Mr. Caldwell, the employees want to know. Will the company continue?" I looked around the empty house, at this life that had ended and begun on the same day. Yes, Carlos. But under a new name. And this time, built on honesty. 6 months had passed since that birthday party that ended in handcuffs. Diane Patterson's trial had become a national sensation. Prosecutors from 3 different states presented evidence linking her to 4 suspicious deaths over 15 years. The pattern was identical in every case: strategic relationships, increased insurance policies, gradual poisoning with digitalis, quick cremation. Victoria accepted a plea bargain. 3 years in prison for corporate fraud and conspiracy, in exchange for testifying against Diane. During the trial, it became clear that my wife had no knowledge of the murder plans. She was being manipulated just as much as I was, only in a different way. Diane had found her insecurities about aging, about losing relevance, and exploited them masterfully. Rachel received probation and community service. The gallery was closed, the assets seized. My daughter now worked in a coffee shop, learning for the first time the value of honest work. She called me every week, offering apologies that became less automatic and more genuine over time. Thomas was the only one who avoided criminal charges by becoming an informant. He testified against everyone, providing documentation that sealed each case. He now worked at my favorite law firm, rebuilding his reputation by defending small businesses against corporate fraud. The irony did not escape any of us. Diane received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On the day of sentencing, our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. I saw no remorse, only cold calculation. She was mentally reviewing where her plan had failed, not mourning the lives she had destroyed. The company I almost lost was now thriving under a new name, Caldwell & Sons Construction. The Sons was for Thomas, who earned a minority stake after proving his worth through hard work and complete transparency. Carlos became vice president of operations, his loyalty finally recognized with a salary that reflected his true worth. We managed to recover the $420,000 that had been embezzled. The clients who had fled during the scandal returned, bringing others with them. Honesty became our trademark. In an industry where corruption was common, we were known as the company that chose integrity over quick profits. The house remained empty for months after the arrests. I couldn't live there, surrounded by ghosts of betrayal. Eventually, I sold it, using the money to build something new. A modern apartment overlooking the river, no memories, no regrets. Every piece of furniture chosen by me, every picture on the wall reflecting my tastes, not marriage commitments. Margaret Chun became a close friend. We had dinner monthly, 2 people who had survived storms and emerged stronger. She introduced me to social circles where my age was seen as wisdom, not obsolescence. Where life stories were valued, not discarded. The most surprising moment came when Victoria wrote to me from prison. Not asking for money or favors, but offering something unexpected: truth. She explained how Diane had systematically isolated her from friends, how she had planted seeds of resentment about my work, how she had turned normal insecurities into fuel for betrayal. "Peter," she wrote in the letter, "I spent our entire life thinking I had to compete with your work for your attention. Diane turned that insecurity into a weapon. But the truth is, I never simply talked to you about how I felt. I let the resentment grow until someone malicious could use it against us both." I didn't respond immediately. It took me weeks to process, to understand that acknowledging her pain didn't mean excusing her actions. Eventually, I wrote back. Not offering reconciliation, but offering something more valuable, understanding. We both failed in our marriage in different ways. The difference is that she let that failure turn into destruction. Thomas organized monthly dinners, just the two of us. Rebuilding trust with my son was harder than rebuilding the company. Each conversation required vulnerability on both sides. He admitted his selfish choices. I admitted that I had been so focused on building a legacy that I forgot to build relationships. "Dad," he said at one of those dinners, "do you want to know what finally made me change? It was realizing that Diane looked at me exactly the way she looked at you. As a useful tool until I was no longer needed. She didn't see either of us as people, just as resources to be exploited." If you've come this far on this journey of betrayal, rebuilding, and unlikely redemption, subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who refused to remain victims and chose to rewrite their own endings. The real transformation didn't come from legal victory or financial recovery. It came from realizing that I had spent 34 years building concrete structures, while neglecting relationship structures. My corporate empire was impeccable, but my emotional empire was in ruins long before Diane appeared. Today, at 63, I wake up in an apartment I chose, work with a team I genuinely respect, and spend time with a son who is learning that redemption is possible through consistent actions, not empty words. Victoria will be out of prison in 2 years. I don't know if we'll speak beyond occasional correspondence. Some relationships don't survive betrayal, even when there is understanding. But I learned something essential in that year that began with a birthday trap and ended in freedom. True power lies not in avoiding betrayal, but in refusing to let it define you. They tried to reduce me to a pickup truck and $5,000. In the process, they forced me to discover that my value was never in the things I owned, but in the integrity I maintained even when it would have been easier to become bitter. Diane remains in maximum security prison, a predator finally caged. Victoria is serving her sentence, facing daily the consequences of choices that seemed justifiable at the time. Rachel serves coffee and learns humility. Thomas works alongside me, proving that some stories include chapters of redemption. And me? I rebuilt not just a company, but a life. A life based on conscious choices, not unconscious routines. On genuine relationships, not convenient arrangements. On integrity that remains consistent whether it is observed or not. The last time I passed by the old house, new residents had planted roses in the garden. New life growing where once there were only ghosts. I smiled and kept driving, not to escape the past, but because I finally had a future that deserved my full attention. They thought 62 years meant I was finished, ready to be discarded. They discovered too late that some people don't diminish with age. They just become more dangerously wise.